Welcome to the channel, everyone. My name is Blue the Jaegers, and yes, I am a real Jaegerist. And today we're going to be discussing what makes Attack on Titan's ending special. Okay, and we're going to be using The Good Place as an example for that. Not as an example, more of a soundboard. And let me see if I still... Okay, my audio still works. Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to be discussing what makes Attack on Titan's ending special, and we're going to be using The Good Place as sort of an example / soundboard, sort of like how I did with my what makes Attack on Titan special, using Death Note as sort of a soundboard. We're going to be using The Good Place's ending, which was awful. But let's just get right into it now. Let me just refresh to you if you do not remember what happened in The Good Place, or maybe you do know what happened in The Good Place, or maybe you don't know what happened in The Good Place. And you want to know what happened in The Good Place. So The Good Place is this show. It's a very good show. It's one of the best shows on television. Of course, it cannot hold a candle to Attack on Titan, not even close. You need look no further than the foreshadowing. The foreshadowing is not as prevalent or as good as Attack on Titan's, although there is some foreshadowing, but that is a prerequisite to any story, so they get no props for that. But The Good Place is still a very, very good show, and it's acclaimed, and rightfully so. It's well done, it's original, it has characters, and an interesting premise. But it ends, it's about them being in the afterlife, and it ends when these people who are striving to get to this place called the Good Place, which is supposed to be heaven, so they were in the bad place, and then Earth was going to get destroyed. But then they went to the good place, which is supposed to be heaven. And they realized that heaven is boring because you eventually get tired of all the excitement. It's sort of like that line from that song. What is it? Every gambler knows that to lose is what he's really there for. Yeah. So pretty much, and there's also the Twilight Zone episode. Maybe some of you know. Twilight Zone is basically this criminal gets killed, and he goes to heaven. Or no, sorry, he dies. And he wins by playing cards. He wins gambling. He has a bunch of women. He's able to do whatever he wants. He's rich. And then he's like, he goes to God, and he's like talking to God, and they eventually realize he's actually not in heaven. He's in hell because he wins all the time, and life has become very dull and predictable and boring. And it's actually pretty horrifying when the episode's over. And that's pretty much their take on heaven, right? So to decide, I know if you're new, if you haven't heard of The Good Place, it's going to be a real shocker to you. They decide that instead of living forever in heaven, they instead decide it'd be better that when they have reached their fill of enjoyment, not only of each other, but of life, they should, and I'm not joking. I am not joking when I say this. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not twisting anything out of context. They literally decide their best plan is to commit suicide in heaven. I'm serious. I know, you're shocked. Go look at the ending. Now, I have several problems with that, which we'll get into later, but that is what happens. They're going to place in everyone except for this rich girl named Tahani, but she becomes an architect. And Janet is not a human, but besides that, everyone else commits suicide in heaven. And then the story ends, right? And then Michael, which is the main antagonist turned protagonist or hero, which is what it's called the postmodern character arc. Again, when I say postmodern character arc, I'm not talking about the philosophy of postmodernism. I'm talking about the time period of postmodernism. Again, I just want these random phrases, and I use them for, like, my name, Blue the Jaegerist. I said that in my first video, and I just stuck with it ever since. Now it's my brand. But that's why I call it a post-modern character arc. You know, he's the bad guy, then he slowly goes to become good, and then he gets this little payoff where he goes out to Earth and becomes a human. And that's how the series ends. Now, many people are very happy with this ending. Because, well, number one, people seriously underestimate the size of the Attack on Titan fan base. The Good Place fan base has nothing on Attack on Titan, and the fans are not nearly as divisive. So a lot of people like this ending. I was one of the few people and my rest of my family. I was one of the few people who despised it with every fiber of my being. The show was great. I watched all of it. I'd probably watch it again. But it was an awful, awful ending. Again, they committed suicide in heaven. None of that's bad per se. It's the way they did. Again, I'm not saying it, and I'm not saying it could ever be good. I'm just saying, just because you have a new idea that sounds stupid at first does not mean it's a bad idea. That's what I'm trying to say. So while the idea of committing suicide in heaven isn't bad in and of itself, the way they did it was awful, and I don't believe there's any way to do it good. But let's continue. So, why is Attack on Titan special? Well, see, both of the endings, surprisingly, had something in common. They are both about love. Only in one ending. In one ending, she decides, I've had enough of Eleanor. Let me kill myself, literally. But it's different with Eren, because Eren, this is done in a much better fashion than any love story I've ever seen. And the reason why I think it's done so well, the love story between Eren and Mikasa, so I say Eren and Armin, between Eren and Mikasa, is because one of the main hallmarks of their relationship is that they did not know they were in love with each other. Which, of course, avoided a lot of these interpersonal romantic discussions and conflict. All the conflict was external conflict. I'll use another show as an example. Hopefully you've seen it. It's called Designated Survivor. And if you haven't seen it, good for you. I'm glad you didn't watch it. Now, while Designated Survivor may seem like an exciting, cool political thriller, at first, it devolves into madness by the end. And one of those reasons is that it's a political thriller, and as the story progressed, people got more and the show was more and more predicated on people's personal feelings and personal conflicts. Let me tell you something, Netflix or whoever wrote that show. When I'm watching a political thriller, when people are trying to watch a political thriller, they don't care about personal conflict. If we want to watch interpersonal conflict, we'd watch something else. We would watch once. That's perfect for interpersonal conflict. We watch other sitcoms. We're not watching freaking Designated Survivor, a show about the President of the United States. We're not watching that to have interpersonal conflict. We're watching it because we're trying to watch about the country. Again, some people may disagree with me. Some people wanted that interpersonal conflict and interpersonal storylines. That's fine. I'm saying for me, I want to watch a political thriller. I want to watch it about politics. And yes, politics does involve... Again, I promise this has something to do with Attack on Titan. I promise you. And yes, politics does have personal conflicts and drama and personal feelings get involved. And 100% it happens. And in fact, it mostly happens. But what I'm trying to say is, when you have people's conflicts and you're not worried about the country or how the country's going or the political movements or decisions that are being made, it takes away from the story and it makes it a soap opera, which is what they were doing. They were making a soap opera out of it, right? So again, it's sort of like if they had a show about JFK, right? And it's about just him cheating on his wife or sleeping with other women. Okay, no one cares about that. Market it as such if we're going to have it like that. But we're watching the JFK show to learn about, okay, the Cuban Missile Crisis, relations with Russia. That's what we're watching it for. And yes, of course, personal conversations and personal stuff does come up. But we're not watching it primarily so we can see all the conflict he has with his wife about the woman coming over. No one cares. But that is the premise of Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is faithful to that. Attack on Titan is about, it's hard to say what it's about in a very short sentence, but it's about war. It's about war. From season 1 to season 4, it's about war. And no one cares about your little personal conflict. And again, I wish I wish and I don't wish I made this channel earlier, because I was not an Eren Mikasa shipper. Okay? I'm sorry, I have no proof of this. I don't even have any posts or memes or anything. I have nothing of the sort. I am so sorry I cannot provide this to you, but I truly, truly was not an Eren Mikasa shipper. I hated both Mikasa and Eren for the longest time. And and you're not gonna believe this, but at the peak of my hatred was when she killed Flock. At the peak of my hatred for her. And I've always hated her. And I was actually leaping for joy. I was so happy when he told her that he hated her. I was so very happy. Seeing those tears come down from her face was so satisfying to me. I know this is a big shocker to most of you. Most of you guys think that I'm just this Mikasa simp and I was this big Eren Mikasa shipper. No, I wasn't. And one of the main reasons why I wasn't an Eren Mikasa shipper, I didn't like ships in general, is because it would distract from the main story. And Isayama, again, to go back to the point I made earlier, Isayama avoided those meaningless interpersonal conflicts because the story was about war. Okay? And so we avoided a bunch of unnecessary, poorly written, contradictory, emotional garbage when we were dealing with Attack on Titan. And what happened was, at the end, that's when the love really came out. And that's when, what happened. The Good Place was not like that. The Good Place, there was a love story from beginning to end. From the first season down to the fourth season. And again, one of the biggest problems, it's actually funny enough, it just occurred to me just as I was recording this. One of the biggest problems I had when this was aired was he was saying that literally, and I'm not even making this up, he literally said, he was implying that he would rather die than be with Eleanor for another minute. That's literally what he was implying. I am not making this up. I am not exaggerating at all. Go watch this speech he made. Go watch the show. I promise you, I'm not twisting the narrative. I'm not doing anything. I promise you. He was implying, and when I say implying, I don't mean he was being like he was like hinting at it. What I'm saying is he was saying that without saying that. If I say, I hate you and your entire family, I'm implying that I hate your sister, sort of in that way, right? He said, I would rather die than spend another minute with you, Eleanor, because I have grown bored of you. Pretty much. And then he's like, oh, and that's what I'm saying. So I'm going too much on a tangent here. But that was a massive problem I had with it. Anyway, we're just on the love part. We're going to go into, if you don't like the Eren Mikasa stuff, you don't like the love stuff and Attack on Titan, there's more coming, trust me. It's not just about love. But that's what he was saying. That's what he was saying. And so he went and he killed himself by walking through a door. He walked through a door and he killed himself, and then Eleanor killed herself too. Man, Eren, on the other hand, this was, again, a tragic love story. It was a very sad love story, and it's the only sort of love story that would have worked with Attack on Titan, right? I thought, there is no place for romance in Attack on Titan. This is a story about war, a cycle of violence, racism, there's evil. There's no way. I mean, yeah, evil's a principle. Stories about evil is a principle. There is no way that he's going to be able to have love into this. That's a personal issue. We're talking about a global issue. But Isayama, the master of all masters, the king of mangakas, did it somehow, some way, and love became the main motivation for Eren's character. And again, you probably disagree with me. That's fine. If you want to debate me, you can debate me on Thursdays and Fridays. You can go watch my videos. I made a bunch of videos about Eren and why I think love is his main motivation. And if you disagree, perfectly fine. I'll talk to you personally. Whatever you want to do. So, but I'm not going to debate that right now. But what I'm saying is, love was his primary motivation. And for me personally, this might not be everyone's favorite, but for me personally, that was the best way to fit love into the story, and that's the best character motivation. I can think of no better character motivation than love. I mean, can you? I mean, what other character motivations are there, really? I mean, we thought he was doing this for love of country, but it ended up being love of wife, which is obviously much better. And again, I'm a patriot, so I'm not saying that love of country is bad. I have 2 flags in my house. I'm not saying that, I have patriotic socks, for goodness sakes. I'm not saying that patriotism is bad. I'm just saying love of wife is like so much higher than love of country. So, with that said, then Eren, of course, and the dialogue is perfect here. Was it executed great? No, of course not. Again, I want to convince people to be on my side, and I want to attract intellectuals to believe and open-minded people to believe what I have to say. So I'm not going to say objectively false stuff like it was executed properly. As I said a bunch of times. Attack on Titan's last chapter, maybe last chapter, I would give it 6 out of 10, right? The entire series I give it 10 out of 10, maybe some chapters would be an 11 out of 10, Charge or Midnight Sun and, Memories of the Future to you 10 years from now. Those would all be like 11 out of 10s, maybe, but I give the rest of the series a 10, and 139 would be a 6 out of 10. But see, The Good Place is so bad that I have to rank it so much lower than Attack on Titan. But the dialogue was great, right? Yeah, and yes, even Simp Eren was great. Because it was great for a couple of reasons why. And this is why I say it's special. Because no author really has the willingness to do such a thing. Where he says, no, I don't want that, right? And this is so deeply appropriate for the time. Because Eren has been hiding himself. Again, admittedly, it's not as clean cut as he was having a fake facade for 4 years. That's not true, but for all intents and purposes, he was having a facade for 4 years. And then he went and did the most painful thing. He went and he told Mikasa he hated her. Which, of course, was definitely more painful for Eren than it was for Mikasa. I'm sure we all know that. And, I mean, we saw how upset Mikasa was. But Eren took it on the chin, still went forward, and, he's been having this facade for 4 long years. And then finally, his true feelings come out. And that's why it's so good. Another reason why it's so good is because it shows how much he's sacrificing. And people say, oh, it sounds like a brat. Well, what exactly is a brat, really? This is why I like to have debates with people, because I want to know what they mean when they say something. So I'm not going to comment on whether he's being a brat, because I don't know what the word brat means to you. But in my opinion, he's not being a brat. Was Carla being a brat when she said don't go? Was she being a brat? Because what she was saying was, I want you to come back and save me, even though I know you're not going to be able to lift up the rocks, and I know that all 3 of you are going to die. That's what she was saying. And those were her last words, mind you. It's like she changed it later, like Eren did. Those were her last words. Now, of course, none of us think that she wanted them to go. But you know what's funny? You know what's funny about Carla's death? Is that she was kicking when the Titan was eating her. Twice. She was kicking when the Titan was eating her. And when I say twice, I mean the manga and the anime. Which means that if it was a mistake, it probably would have been corrected. Just like Annie's laugh was, corrected. All this stuff was corrected. Her legs weren't broken. Which means that she was lying about her legs being broken so that Eren and Mikasa would leave her. It's almost as if her actions actually have more weight than her words. As if she really wanted them to leave her to die and live long, happy lives. Sort of like how Eren lied about hating Mikasa and lied about a whole bunch of other stuff. And if you go to 139, you can see each and every time he lied and manipulated somebody. And funny enough, at the end of after his memories of 139, he said, "I want them to live long, happy lives." That's the last thing you hear after his memories are over. He's not saying, "I want to secure Parity's future. I want to gain freedom." He says, "I want them to live long, happy lives." Y'all should have known from the start. But that's what makes Attack on Titan special. We have this line, which is so beautiful and fits so perfectly. He says it out clearly. He doesn't want that. He wants Mikasa to be obsessed with him for 10 years after. And then you're starting to see the immense sacrifice that he's making. Because that's how he actually feels. Up to this point, we didn't know that Eren loved Mikasa that much. So his sacrifice was less impactful than it was after he said that. But then after he said, then on top of that, we know he's suppressing those feelings for her sake. Because after he says, of course he says, "Forget I said that." Why would no, don't tell her that. I'm sure it came up at one point. But that's what the fanfic requires before. Go write a fanfiction about that. But I'm sure it came up at one point. But he said, "Forget I said that. Don't tell Mikasa that. I don't mean that." And then, of course, as we all know, or maybe hopefully most of us know at this point, 138 happens chronologically after 139, and he. And of course, he says to her, throw away a scarf, forget about me, and live a long, happy life. And this is another thing. What a beautiful setup we're having here, because again, the dialogue here is so impactful and so special because we have a guy who's so blatantly misguided. He has no idea Mikasa loves him. He asks her, she says she doesn't, and he's like, okay, whatever. And then he goes on, genocides 8% of the world, but he does just love her, but he doesn't know if she loved him. Another thing that I think is that Eren doesn't feel like he's worthy to be loved by Mikasa because he knows how bad of a person he is, right? This is a theory. I'm not saying this is how he feels. This is something to think about why he didn't confess earlier. So then then he says that, of course, because he's trying to be a selfless person. This is how you actually write dialogue for love here. So he's trying to be selfless. He's trying to suppress his feelings because, again, we know how he actually feels about Mikasa. He says to throw it away and forget about him because he wants her to remember him, and that is selfish of him. So he says, "Oh, actually, forget about me, right? Don't be hung up on me for 10 years. Actually, forget I even existed." Of course, that is a ridiculous thing to ask of Mikasa. And then once Eren realizes this, her skirt slips down, and then he goes and he wraps it around her, and then that completes their love. He knows that she loves him. He knows that she loves him. She knows that he loves her, and yeah, so then that completes their arc, completes their understanding, and it sets Mikasa free once and for all. And of course, it is tragic because nothing else would possibly work in this world. Now, on the good place, however, I raise how I said as far as the love goes and the romance and stuff like that. I mean, guys, like, what good place fans? Seriously, am I wrong when I say that that's what Chidi was saying? Am I wrong? He's like, oh, the wave goes back to where it belongs. He's saying I belong away from you is what he's saying. That's the other thing. That is the other thing. I completely forgot about that. But this pseudo-dramatic, pseudo-emotional nonsense is what I despise about most media. You'll notice that Attack on Titan has no pseudo-emotional moments. 139 is a whole real emotion. 138 is a whole real emotion. That's real. When Mikasa kisses that head, that's real emotion. That is years and years of built-up foreshadowing and characters that have been written for that specific purpose. And that is such a beautiful scene. It's nuanced. It's great. It has a very, very relevant plot point, and it's beautiful. And when she kisses that head, the emotions you're feeling and what they're also trying to convey is actual, real, emotional, writing. It's very good writing. It's very impactful. And again, you may not like it. That's fine. You also didn't like season 3 part 1. You also liked the Rumbling arc. You should have left in season 3 part 1. There's that Turkish guy on Critical's podcast. He was like, oh, Attack on Titan lost its way. Season 3 part 1 started talking about politics. Like, I just want to see people slaughter Titans. I'm like, yeah, exactly. And he stopped watching. Good for him. I'm glad he stopped watching. I'm glad. Because why should he continue? That's what you guys should have done. You all should just left season 3 part 1. You guys should just left. There's no reason for you to continue watching. But and I say that because I don't want people. The reason I say this is because I don't want people thinking that somehow Eren and Mikasa's love or 138 was bad because other people didn't like it. That's ridiculous. But this wave nonsense is pseudo-dramatic because Eren had to die. You see, Eren wanted to save Mikasa. He wanted her to live a long, happy life. And he wanted Perry to live a long, happy life. And he wanted freedom for him and his people. Blah, 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 blah. And he wanted Titans to be gone from the world. Also to help another female, which he does not have any romantic interest in. Imagine that's another thing. Imagine that. Imagine him having a good, deep friendship with another female and not having any romantic feelings towards her. Isn't that amazing? And so he didn't want to send his story into hell. He didn't want the Titans to be around. And he didn't want Armin to have the Colossal, which is why, he's talking to Armin, saying, because that's what I was thinking when he was saying, I don't want any of you guys to have the Attack Titan. I was like, well, give it to Armin. That's perfect because then he's gonna die anyway, and he'll be able to protect all of them. But of course, he didn't say I'll give it to Armin because he knew what he was gonna do in the future. Anyway, so, so he another thing. Quickly on a quick note, because I just want to make sure that everything's all tied up. The reason why he didn't just kill everybody and then destroy and get rid of the Titans is because the Titans were going to be obsolete soon, so he cannot rely on Titan powers to protect them. Anyway, let's go back. So this is an actual real moment. This is an actual real thing. You actually feel, because you know that Aaron's been distracted by his insatiable thirst for freedom, which blinded him to what was right in front of him, that being Mikasa. And again, this correlates right back to Zeke, where he couldn't understand the beauty of life because he was so focused on ending life. So Aaron was so obsessed with freedom, he forgot that he actually had freedom there the entire time, right? And so it makes sense, among other things, and it makes sense why he didn't notice that she loved him, or confess that she loved him. And also, as well, we know he needed to die, and when she kisses him, we know that she loved him, but she still had to get rid of him for the good of humanity. And that's why that kiss is so powerful and so impactful and so actually emotional. That Waves nonsense was ridiculous. They're in heaven, and they're going to commit suicide in heaven. They're going to commit suicide in heaven. And he says, the wave, it goes back. It's there, and then it goes down, and it's where it belongs. It's in the water. Ridiculous. So ridiculous. But of course, as I said, I knew the show was. I wasn't disappointed by The Good Place because I knew what was going to happen. These are babies writing about what's going to be like outside the womb. How could they make that? How could they possibly write something like that? Right? If you're a baby, you have to be able to write a story about what happens outside of the womb, because not only is your knowledge flawed, your thinking is flawed, and your mental capacity is limited. But he says that, and so it's just, and everyone's like, oh, so sad, blah, 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 blah. You should be sad because he said, I would rather die than be with you. That's why you should have been sad. But apart from that, that is why it's, and again, most shows are like it. I'm using The Good Place because The Good Place is the cream of the crop. The Good Place is a very well done show, and it's a show that a lot of people are happy with, and rightfully so. I'd say, right, it's more nuanced than that, but I'd say rightfully so. The ending was good, I'd say, in a certain sense, and the love story between Chidi and Eleanor was good in a sense. And so I'm not using One Place because it's things bad. I'm using One Place because it's the cream of the crop, and Attack on Titan is even better than the cream of the crop. So Chidi then commits suicide, right? And it's a pseudo-emotional moment, and everyone's crying for no good reason because he said something emotional. What you should be crying about is Armin, because Armin actually said something that's actually deep in 137. And again, he says that, and it makes sense, and he says that in the worst environment possible. What he says about, life having trivial moments and all this other stuff that are important, right? He says that in one of the worst, anime worlds around. And so it's, it's not being idealistic, right? And so, that is why. It's like he's saying that in Pokemon, where it's like, oh yeah, easy for you to say you're in Pokemon, but he says in Attack on Titan, for goodness sakes. And, so that, on the love aspect, that's why I'd say, it's, so much better than even The Good Place. Even the rushed, half-baked, undercooked, 139 was better than The Good Place, because The Good Place, I'm done talking about the love aspect. We're going to go on down to the story and plot. So, The Good Place is the polar opposite, and most shows are. I mean, I'm not just picking The Good Place. I'm actually using this as a sounding board, but most shows are predicated on the idea that humans are, generally, or most people are generally good people, right? And there usually is a very happy ending, as you see in The Good Place. There's a happy ending, right? Everyone got to go to heaven, right? They fixed the system, and the system to get into heaven, I mean. And they all, did whatever, and then, Michael became a human, and, so on and so forth. Attack on Titan isn't like that. Attack on Titan is real, and this is why I say it's why I equate it to classic literature because it's real. It doesn't pretend to do anything that it cannot do. Most shows would write themselves into a hole, right? Take for example most people's preferred ending of Attack on Titan, that being he goes full rumbling and he stops the cycle of violence, which of course makes no sense, not only in our world but in their world, because it's been established so many times, even by Eren himself, mind you. Eren says this himself, that the cycle of violence will not stop, and he says this when he only thinks there's Eldians around. Think about that. Think about that. He says the idea is rosy if humanity stop fighting. He says that referring to Eldians. meaning, even if every person besides an Eldian was killed, he'd still believe that conflict would happen. Now another thing, this brings me into another thing. Lelouch from Code Geass. People were saying Eren's like Lelouch. And I can sort of understand why. I mean, I don't understand why, but I can sort of see why you would think that. I know it's hard to explain. But that is ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. And again, that's why I'm bouncing between shows right now. But he is nothing like Lelouch. Because number one, Lelouch was, had one goal. Eren had three. Okay? Or four? Is it three? Three. He had three. Eren had three goals in mind when he started the rumbling. So, yeah. He's not like Lelouch in that way. And in another way, Eren also was not lying. Lelouch was lying to get people to think he was a villain so that he could get killed. Eren did not have the intent on he did not intend on uniting his enemies. That was his intent. His intent, among other things, was to rumble the entire world. Now, he was completely serious and he fully intended on doing that. Number three, again, as said in the foreshadow in Trost, Pexis said, if there was one enemy, again, this is when he's ignorant. He said if there was one powerful enemy that humanity would stop fighting and, unite and fight that enemy. Eren says that idea is rosy. This is ignorant Eren. This is season 1 Eren. So, why would you think that that's what he was trying to accomplish? Why would you think he was trying to pull a Lelouch? But you see, this is the thing about popular media. You have people who have one motivation to do what they're doing. And so, a lot of people whose profile is they watch a lot of anime, and then they, of course, that's how they stumble into Attack on Titan, then they think, oh, Eren has one motivation. So I see people on my side saying that Eren didn't care about freedom or parity, he just cared about his friends. And then I see people on the other side saying he just cared about parity or freedom and not about his friends. I'm like, guys, it's all of those things. It's all of those things. You can't handle a little bit of nuance and complexity, but that's what Eren is. He doesn't have one singular motivation for doing the rumbling. He has multiple motivations for doing the rumbling, which sometimes collide with each other. But at the end of the day, obviously, Mikasa is his highest priority, which is why he accepts death, even though he can turn literally everyone into flowers. And he could easily emotionally manipulate Mikasa if he had to, if he wanted to, easily. Since he can't control her, he can manipulate her emotionally, because she's very, very vulnerable to that. So Attack on Titan is not portrayed its premise by stopping the cycle of violence. That's why Isayama puts in that parody is being bombed, because he's like, well, what did you expect? You were supposed to expect that. Why didn't you expect it? Because even Armin said in 139 that conflict will never end. So what made you think that parody was safe from that principle? Right? And here's the other thing, but misunderstand, and this actually ties back into a good place, when I say that people are somehow good. People assume that, the Marlians are bad. So if we get rid of the Marlians, we'll be good. Some people didn't like the ending. But this is obviously not the case in Attack on Titan. Isayama lays it out perfectly clear with Colt. Colt said the devil's in all of us. That's why the world is the way that it is. Notice, he didn't say the devil's in all of us when we get pushed to our limits, when we're in bad situations. He says the devil's in all of us, and that's why we're in this bad situation to begin with. So, that is why parody devolves into violence after Eren does whatever he does. Because that is the principle of the story. The cycle of violence will never end. That's the entire point of the story. But most authors would be reluctant to do that. They would want something more consumable, more palatable for the masses. They would want it to be a happy ending where nothing happens and world peace is accomplished forever, which is what they want Eren to do. Eren accomplished world peace. No, he did. Not forever, but he did, and people weren't happy. They wanted him to accomplish world peace forever. They said he somehow failed because Parody got into a war again. Well, what did you expect? Did you expect Parody not to go to war again? It's like, when I say, I forget what the name of them was, but did the people fail in the World War I because another war started again with some of the same countries joining on the other side? Did they fail? No one would say that. That's ridiculous because we have an understanding as human beings that wars are inevitable and wars are to happen over and over again. But people were insisting that Eren failed because that happened. And Isayama deliberately put that panel in there. He had all the themes in there. Deliberately put that panel in there to show that that's what happens, and he canonized it and show what I would think that he's not afraid of doing something like that. Because that's what he does. But at the same time, again, most people who do that are making a hopeless story. Attack on Titan is actually a very hopeful story. And it stays true to its principles about how you can still have a good life even though life is hard. Because, again, usually stories that end like a bad ending where everything, is reversed, quote unquote. They usually have a very dark message. This is actually a very hopeful and bright message, and doesn't fall into the absolute inanity that The Good Place does. Which I might say betrays the story's themes, because the themes are always ridiculous. This is a show that's based upon, heaven and hell system being flawed, and that, if you do, a certain amount of good, you're able to get into the good place, and then that it's just a very bad show from the beginning. But they were like, cheating and what's his face? They're good people. Oh yes. Which of course Attack on Titan rejects by having every one of the antagonists be all awful people, which should be apparent to people from the beginning of the story. But somehow people still miss the obvious messaging that none of the people who are beating Eren or going after Eren or even Eren himself, none of those people are good guys. That's but people still want to do it. People still want to make a good guy and a bad guy because that's what popular media does. They have a clear-cut good guy and a clear-cut bad guy, right? But that is definitely not the case in here. So yeah, and that's where a lot of confusion stems from. Just general misunderstanding or not taking into consideration other things. People think, oh, Eren did this for freedom. Oh, this is a bad ending. Everyone dies. This is horrible. People misunderstand what's actually happening because they can't think outside of one paradigm. They think that it must be one or the other, and they could not possibly be both. And I'm sure I don't need to explain to you, other elements. So I already talked about, Lelouch and how that is absolutely subpar to Attack on Titan. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe I should expand on that, on why Lelouch is or the Code Geass is a much worse ending. There was much less themes. The characters were less developed, of course. There's a lot of reasons why, and people were whining about, Lelouch was actually retconned. Eren was not retconned. He's been the same guy. So, yeah. So, at that, of course, we talked about, The Good Place, which is ridiculous in every possible way. And another show I like to bring up, which actually has an ending into it, which is actually quite rare in television. If you should actually look around, there's very few stories that are concise. Have an ending in mind and then write it out to the beginning. Another show is Death Note. People like to say, "Oh, maybe Death Note's ending is better." Death Note's ending is not even near Attack on Titan. How could you possibly say that? Was it better executed? Yeah, I'll give you that for sure. And but the thing is that what was the actual message there? In fact, it was not only did it have an actual plot hole, capital P plot hole, which would be if the Death Note doesn't run out of pages. So is it Mika? Yeah, whatever the guy's name was, he could have just wrote another thing. Not only did that, it was an actual plot hole and Death Note's ending. The messaging was weird, right? I thought killing was wrong, right? Even for bad people. Why I was saying killing light, whatever. And of course, L was I'm not gonna get too much into the moral messaging and how ridiculous it was. And also, it was incredibly predictable, which is not bad to have a predictable. And I wouldn't say Death Note was a bad show because it was predictable. It's actually a pretty good show. I'm just saying Attack on Titan is better because they had, again, more themes. There was multiple themes going on there. There was this bonds, there was freedom, there was love, all going on at one time. And, of course, the ending had a plot twist. There was an ending. There was a mystery that was there, that was not there in Death Note because we got what we got. We knew, okay, it's either going to be L killing the task force, or it's going to be the task force killing L. Okay, what is going to happen? And it turned out, oh, yeah, L just got killed, and then, whatever happened, right? We didn't get a really impactful moral message that we can actually apply to our day-to-day lives, because most of us are not going to kill people. That's just a plain and simple fact. Most of us are not going to take another life. But a lot of us can apply Attack on Titan's message to our own personal lives, and of course we can apply them globally as well. There's multiple messages going on there. So yeah, I really hope that I actually explained the three those types of endings, right? Because we got the plot twist ending with Code Geass, which was, it was okay. It wasn't Attack on Titan, but it was okay. We got the regular, predictable, well thought out, well planned Death Note ending. That was that's fine. And then we have the Good Place, which is supposed to be this incredibly emotional, which was absolute nonsense. But Attack on Titan, what it did was it actually combined both of those. They got the plot twist ending and they got the emotional ending, and it combined them better than anything else. Better than anything people have ever seen. And we'll see for quite some time, especially as an anime. You see, it's a miracle what happened with Attack on Titan. Absolute miracle. Not the story, but the fact that it got an anime, and such a good anime at that. Look at Berserk. Berserk's a great story, but it's been, cursed by the fact that it has not had a good anime adaptation at all. Weight and Mappa adapted word for word at Isayama's exact discretion. The soundtracks are good. We had a legendary composer. The director is as good. The director is good and he knows what he's doing. The voice actors are, I don't even talk about the way everyone knows how good the voice actors are. There's no debate, right? And that's special. And that's why I get so mad when people try to discredit Attack on Titan or discredit its author when, this is something that you're not going to see probably until you die. Because this sort of stuff, a lot of things that are outside of Isayama's control have to go right for something so beautiful to happen. He was rejected by, some magazines before he went to Betsy's Show and Jump. So, this is an absolute miracle what happens. It's very special, and we have a generational actual masterpiece that is conveyed through, contemporary means. We have great stories. Great stories aren't uncommon. There's a lot of people in the world, and there's been a lot of people in the world. We have a lot of great stories. But, take for example Scarlet Letter. That's been adapted a bunch of times in movies. All those movies suck. Mainly because they're movies and it's too long to fit it into a movie. We have all these great literatures, and yes, those are literatures of old, and they didn't have, anime as we have it now. But now we have, and that's why I say it's a generational masterpiece, because now we have an actual, well-written, classic, certified real masterpiece that is being portrayed through the best of its contemporary means, and very powerful means. And that's another thing. When I talk about the voice actors and the music, those enhance the story on an emotional level. right? So we cannot have that with other literature. So, and of course, with a manga, the faces also communicate a lot. I mean, think about Aaron's face at the end of the story. Of course, you can write it out. Of course, you can write out what his face looks like, but his face, when you actually look at it in the manga and later in the anime, when he's, doing the rumbling, he's about to die, that portrays a lot to the audience. In the face when he tells Armin, after he gets done telling him about the plot twist, he says, let's go home, let's leave, or something like that. I mean, that face conveys so much, and that's not something you can have with just pen and paper. Pen and paper can only get you so far. So that is why you should really watch your tongue and measure your criticism carefully. Criticism is of course valid. I mean, we're it's a free country. It's a free space to talk about whatever and debate ideals, but I'd say measure your words very carefully and levy your criticisms with the best intentions at heart. Don't just spam on your keyboard whatever sick, twisted nonsense comes to your head. But anyway, that's what I'd say. Again, if you don't like what I say, or you just don't like me personally, you can always email me or comment, and I'll be happy to debate you Thursday and Friday nights, Eastern Standard Time. Hope you guys all had a great day and a great week, and I'll see you in my next video.